Hello, my name is Gail Seiler, and I'm honored to be here on behalf of Betrayal Project USA. We are a victim led organization dedicated to exposing institutional betrayal and medical crimes, honoring those who are lost, and pursuing justice for crimes committed under the guise of public health, primarily the COVID-19 protocols and shots. You can learn more about our work, view victim stories, and get involved by visiting our website at betrayalprojectusa.org. You can also follow us on Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, X, Facebook, X formerly known as Twitter, by either searching Betrayal Project USA or visiting our website and clicking on the links for our social media. You can also subscribe to our Substack and get all of our articles and newsletter. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Vicky, whose husband was killed in a hospital in North Carolina. And so, thank you for joining us, Vicky. And let's start by
Thank you.
telling people about John, about your husband, John.
All right. My husband, John Lawshe, um, died at 72 years, but he lived a big, full life before that. Uh, he was born, uh, he was born in, I can't remember, a northern state, but he's a southern boy. And we always called him the Yankee. And he loved to brag that he lived in Alaska before it was a state. His father was career military, and they lived in Anchorage. And so that he brought that into the conversation all the time. Oh, I lived in Alaska before it was a state. And then he ended up in Florida, and he basically was a Florida boy. He surfed,
Yeah.
and he just had a lot of fun. Um, I met him in 1985 ish when we both worked at Martin Marietta, which is called Lockheed Martin now.
Yeah.
And we just fell in love. And, in 1991, we got married. And then we had our two boys, Jack and Eric, in 92 and 1993. And we lived in Florida, and John was still at Lockheed Martin until he retired in 2013 after 30 some years. And after he retired, we moved up here from Florida to North Carolina because he had lived in North Carolina as a child at Fort Bragg. And then he lived in Asheville in the early 70s. And then he wanted to come back here and retire in the mountains. So we did. And, I'm getting stuck.
No, and of course
This
you have
picture was taken on
grandchildren.
my birthday about 10 years ago. And we have two grandchildren and one on the way any day now. I have a 12-year-old granddaughter from my oldest son, Jack, who is actually John Malcolm, but he's not really a junior. And then this baby is my youngest boy's little daughter, who turns 10 this year.
Wow.
And John was a very physically fit person. He taught me how to run because I never was, I hated gym class in school, and I just hated it. But he taught me how to run, and I had been a runner now on and off for about 30 years. And in fact, I even got back into it once we moved to North Carolina, and I lost about 100 pounds. And I thought, maybe I'll start running again. And I owe every minute of it to him because he was my coach and mentor and my biggest cheerleader. And this photo was taken at the Biltmore Estate. We were members
Oh,
for a few years, and we would tour the house and whatnot. This is John showing his dog Sig to championship. He likes showing dogs. He showed dogs as a child, and then after he retired, he wanted to get back into it again. And we had been breeding dogs for a few years beforehand, and he finally got Sig, that's Sig, as his first show dog, and he showed him by himself to championship. And he was so proud. He was so proud of that dog. And then Sig had a litter, and one of his daughters, Bitsy, and John showed her championship. So he got to show two dogs all the way through. And that was basically the last thing he participated in 2017, he developed throat cancer. And we went through some grueling months of treatment with radiation and chemo. And that was really rough on him. He was never exactly the same after that, but we had 4 more years after that of clean scans. And those 4 years I consider a gift.
Yeah.
And this
And
is a
this,
family shot of my two sons, daughter-in-law, and my grandchildren.
yeah. And I think you told me
Okay.
this was the last
Um,
photo, family photo.
that was our last family photo shoot. Yes, because I see. Yeah, that was the last one. Probably, and I see his beard is gone. So it was after cancer. So it was probably within
Yeah.
the last. Well, let's see, about 5 years ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's it. And then we decided we weren't going to be vaccinated, and then he fell ill in 2021,
Yeah. So
and that's
let's
the hospital part.
yeah, so let's talk about that. So um a lot of times people will ask, like, everybody has different reasons for deciding not to be vaccinated. I think a lot of us were not necessarily anti-vaxxers, but there came a point when what was that decision point for you guys?
We never wanted to get vaccinated. We thought the whole thing was a hoax. We thought it was something didn't smell right, and we just weren't going to do that. And we encouraged our sons not to get vaccinated. One of them did, but I don't think he got any more boosters. But it just seemed so silly, and the distance, keep your distance, and it none of it made sense. And so we weren't going to get vaccination of something we didn't even know or knew had been tested or anything.
Mhm.
So no, there was
It-
no way.
right, exactly. And so when did John did both of you get sick or just John?
We both did. He fell ill like right after Thanksgiving in 2021.
Yeah.
And then he went to the doctor for something, and I can't even remember what, but he went into Asheville. And like 4 or 5 days after that, he started feeling sick. He thinks he picked it up at the doctor's office, but he started feeling sick. But it just felt like a flu, and something that we could get over. Like, a week before, we were out running at the lake. Well, I ran around the lake, and he would watch birds. He was a bird watcher, but he could run up this really steep hill that I even had trouble doing. I mean, so he was healthy, and
Yeah.
like a week or two before, he was running up a steep hill. But then he started feeling ill after that doctor visit. So I took him in. He wanted to go into the hospital. I said, "Are you sure?" I had a bad feeling about it anyway. But we went in on Monday, December 6th, and we waited and waited and waited in the emergency room. And when they took him back, they made me go out into the parking lot and wait in my car. So I don't know if they asked him back there if he was vaccinated or not, but they wouldn't let me there. And so it was a few hours, and he came back out to the car and he said, "We can go home. I just have to take Tylenol." They told me just take Tylenol.
Oh.
Okay. So he wasn't feeling much better the next day on Tuesday. And Wednesday morning, he wanted to go back. So I took him back, and I can't remember the conversation, but they were taking him back again, and I had to go out to the parking lot. And this is December, and I remember the nurse saying, "Well, there's no cure for COVID." So I'm thinking, why are we even here?
Right.
But then they took him back, and I was waiting out in the parking lot for a few hours until and texting back and forth with him, and he finally told me, "Just go on home. They're going to get me a room." But he didn't get into a room until that evening.
Yeah.
And then I was at home, and I think by that time I was getting sick as well because I knew I lost my sense of smell and taste.
Yeah.
And I figured, okay, this is it too. But they got him into the hospital, and that night I was thinking, I'm going to call that hospital and I want to tell them I'm calling as John's advocate. Don't give him any ivermectin. I mean, don't give him remdesivir, and I would like you to give him ivermectin. Oh, and they kind of blow you off, but I asked anyway because it's my duty.
Yeah.
Well, and I was allowed half-hour visits with him during the day. I came in, I was allowed a half hour, and I was not feeling so great, and I'm taking care of all the dogs here. So I would drag myself into the hospital, take my mask off in his room, and I'd kind of just lay on across the bed with him because I was really tired. But so I would spend my half hour and talk with him and leave, and I couldn't do that again until the next day. Um, they never forced a DNR or anything that I know of. I never signed anything. But he was DNR during cancer treatment. I don't know if that was on file.
Oh, yeah, right.
Neither here nor there. But
D-
after a week or so, they put him in a bigger room in the ICU with big old windows. And I thought, oh, this is a nice room. Not realizing actually that that's the room that's big enough to hold a ventilator. So around the night of the 21st, the afternoon, the nurse called me and said, we're going to put John on a ventilator. And I said, no, you can't do that. Because ventilator, right away, I knew that he would die. And the nurse said, why don't you come in and you can stay as long as you need to and talk with him. And I came in and I called my younger son to come meet me there as well. Because I knew that was it. And I knew this was going to be our final conversation. And when I got in there, he said, now you find a dachshund rescue and you get rid of those dogs. And now, would someone who thinks they're coming home say that? No.
Right. No.
So I lied to him and said I would. But he was just worn so thin because he had oxygen on his face most of the time, and it was so loud that he had to put earplugs in his ears. It was the
Yeah.
oxygen was so loud, and it was probably just wearing him down.
Yeah, it's a lot of oxygen, so it was like the BiPAP or whatever that was blowing in his face.
Right, and it was making him crazy. And when we were talking with the nurse that last night, and I've talked with other survivors, and we can mouth the same things. They were telling him the ventilator was going to rest his lungs.
Yeah.
I don't know what else they're telling. And then my son and I asked John more than 3 times, several times, are you sure this is what you want? Are you sure you want this? And he said, yeah, I'm sure. I don't I don't know why they had to have sold him some bill of goods. But
Yeah. I mean, the gaslighting can be quite strong if you're told that you're going to die without something for sure. And then,
right. And then that last night as I was waiting to go in to see John, I was talking with his doctor and the nurse in a separate little off room somewhere, and I said, you're killing him. You're going to kill him. No, 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 that's not it. I mean, I was ugly crying. I knew what was happening, like in real time. And oh no, no, this is just going to rest his lungs. We've known people that have been on the ventilator for a couple weeks and then they come back out of it. And I knew that was not true. And then I tried to keep it together for John because he made his decision and he saw what my face looked like when I came in to visit with him. So, but I did get to tell him he was the love of my life. And he got to tell my younger boy that what a lovely family he had. And, we had some parting words. And, if there's any closure to be had, that's it. But when I went home that night, I mean, the wail of an animal, the cry of an animal is what I was doing that night. And then the next day, we went in to see him, and he had the vent in, and the room was so quiet. I mean, it doesn't sound anything like that oxygen. It was so quiet. And he was out, and his fingers were swelled up terribly. And they had an IV they put in his neck. I figured that was the remdesivir. And he just, I felt so bad for him. And so we visited for that half hour and then went home. And about 3 o'clock, we got a call. It said, he's coded twice. You need to come. So both of my sons happened to be here at the time. And so we all ran up to the hospital, and we get in the hallway, and the nurse meets us there. And I said, well, did he pass? Yeah, he did. So they took all, when I saw him, he looked like he did when he was napping. There were no tubes, there was no IVs. He looked like he was taking a nap, but he wasn't.
Right.
And it was less than 24 hours on a vent and the death certificate says, well, the first thing was COVID death and then acute kidney failure. Well, I had seen his little, bedside thing, and everything looked fine with his kidneys, but it was acute. His kidneys were blown out basically,
Yeah.
and then so his body shut down, and then he died.
So you had said no remdesivir, but did they give him remdesivir?
Now I'm believing they did because of the kidney issue,
Yeah.
and like again, I was still ill, and I was in shock. I there's a lot of things I wish I would have done records wise about him, but I was not in my right mind, and I did not get a complete summation or anything from the hospital. I just have his certificate that says COVID and acute kidney failure.
Yeah. They
And
would they would still have those records. They have to keep records of somebody who died in the hospital. They have to keep the records for 50 years, so they would still have them. But did you ever ask for ivermectin
I
or any
did.
type of?
I did ask for ivermectin, and the hospitalist in charge of his case said, "Well, no, there haven't been any studies on that in regards to humans, so we're not doing that." And it would be like beating a dead horse.
Yeah.
That killed that conversation. And when I mentioned to John one time while he was in the hospital, I said, "Ask the doctor about remdesivir," and he gave me don't.
Right.
So he must have asked as well and was shut down.
Yeah, they had their protocol and they were going to stick to it. It's
Right.
interesting. Like so, I always it's interesting that in 2021 they were telling people that there was no studies or anything behind ivermectin because remdesivir and ivermectin were both listed on the NIH website for COVID,
Mm,
and they just ignored the pennies per pill ivermectin and went right for the highly incentivized deadly remdesivir. So
yeah. Yeah. So, and then the hospital made a tidy sum, $250,000 per COVID death.
yeah, yeah, and they got extra bonuses if somebody was on Medicare, Medicaid, or VA, or any of that.
Right.
Um, yes. So is there anything else that you can think of during that hospital stay? Were you pretty much there every day, but
I
not
was
at
there every
night?
day, not at night. I was allowed a half an hour visit per day. And
Oh,
what worked for me was 10 to 10:30 in the morning. And then I would come home and nap for 2 hours.
yeah,
I couldn't eat that whole month. I was stressed out about him and
yeah,
sick. And I mean, I would get out of bed sometimes and almost kind of topple over because I couldn't eat. Nothing tasted. like anything.
Right.
And plus, I was just so freaked out. I mean, I always we had a little bit of an age difference. He's 13 years older, so I mean, there was always that in the back of your mind. Is he gonna go first? No, maybe we'll go together at the same time. But
Yeah.
it's always in the back of your mind that yeah, he probably will go first,
Right.
and then it happens, and then now what? Now what?
Yeah. Do you think do you think he was treated at all different because of the vaccination status?
I think he was. I mean, they didn't give him any IV medications that I saw. They gave him a nebulizer treatment every few days or so, and then they had the oxygen on him. But that's they might have given him some antibiotics, but that's it. So he was basically not treated for 2 weeks. I mean, he was maintained with his breathing and whatnot, but you know,
Yeah,
and,
like
and his oxygen levels, while they were a little low, he could even the day before he died, he could bring it up. He knew how to bring him up. I was looking at his levels; they looked okay. I wouldn't. I mean, during those last few days, they were even talking about discharging, maybe discharging on oxygen. But then they decided to vent him.
oh yeah. How many days was he vented before he died?
They put him on the vent, I believe, the night of the 21st of December,
Oh,
and he died at 5 o'clock the next day. So less than 24 hours. And he was speaking coherently, you know, the last time
yeah.
we talked. He wasn't in pain. He was
Yeah.
aggravated by having to be in the hospital, but and he wanted to get out, but he I don't I don't know. He and it's hard to say. When I look at some photos from a few days before, he did look sick, but you don't see it when you see someone every day. It's like
Yeah.
losing weight. You don't really notice somebody losing weight unless you don't see them for a little while. It's like, oh wow, okay. So he's sick. He probably had pneumonia, but I don't know if it was. They told him it was COVID, so they must have jammed something up his nose or
Sure.
whatever. I don't believe in those tests either. So I don't believe he necessarily had COVID, I, because I don't think they actually isolated the virus itself, but he had something. He had probably some pneumonia, but they just weren't treating him because they said that right before going in, there's no cure for COVID. So I knew that they weren't really going to be trying too hard.
Right. Um, were your sons there or able to see him?
The night before, my youngest son came from work and met me at the hospital, and so he and I got to talk with him and see him. Now, my oldest son did not. He was working, and but he came the next day. So when we found out that when they called and said that John had coded a couple times, we all got into the car and went to the hospital together, and we got to see him then. My oldest got to see him then, but he didn't. My oldest didn't think it was that serious, because he knew when John went into the hospital, and his work hours were such that he wasn't able to come in, and he didn't realize how serious it was.
Yeah.
He figured Dad would be back home in a couple days, and then it's a big lesson you learn in life. Sometimes there is no tomorrow.
That's right. That's right. So, so he so he was vented on the 21st. He died on the 22nd. Do you know, and maybe you don't know this, but do you know if the physician who vented him had any experience in working with ventilation?
I don't know that. I don't.
Yeah. It might be good to.
And the doctor who did this just came on that day.
Okay. Were there so I'm curious, were there
Yeah, the doctor.
go ahead. Were there was there a consistent care team, or was
No,
it
go ahead.
always changing? Yeah, always changing. Um that's why I wonder,
He
like, go
for
ahead.
the first 10 for the first 10 days he had a hospitalist taking in charge of the care. And then
Mhm.
when they moved him to the bigger ICU room, he had a different doctor, but I think I only saw him the day before the night they vented him. And so I was unfamiliar with him and didn't have much of a bedside manner either.
Yeah, describe that
But
bedside manner.
once he moved to ICU, yeah, it was a different team, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, was it changing every
Um,
day?
just uncaring.
Say that again?
Um, no, no, but he had a different team. He did have a different team once he was in the ICU, but I only met that doctor. Well, I met him the night they vented him, and then he came into the room as we were all with John's body. And he very offhand, and it just seemed uncaring. And I, I've been a medical transcriptionist for 15 years. I know doctor talk and I can understand doctor talk, and I know when I'm being talked down to or just
Yeah.
not regarded. And he was the one I said, "Well, you're killing him," and I think he probably took offense to that. Well, I took a lot of offense to it as well.
Yeah, because he was killing him. Um yeah. So
Hmm.
um well, that's interesting. Okay, so you kind of being a medical, having done medical transcription, you would have known, like, the things that they were saying. Do you know if there was any of the staff were either transitional in terms of traveling or FEMA?
I don't know that. No.
Okay.
Um, I believe they were employees of the hospital.
Okay. All right.
And the hospital wasn't crowded. It's not as if they needed extra personnel.
Was it a big hospital or smaller? Was it the major hospital in the area?
It's about, well, it's the major hospital in Haywood County. Now, the hospital in Asheville is a very big hospital that, several floors and two buildings. The hospital in Haywood County, oh, I think it has 7 floors. And,
Oh, okay.
and then a couple little doctor buildings for imaging and this and that. So mid-size,
Yes, still a decent sized hospital. So let me ask you this. So you did at some point you realized something was terribly wrong, and that the protocols had, and the lack of treatment and treatment had killed your husband. Was that right away, or did that happen later?
I didn't want him to go to the hospital in the first place because I said, if you go in there, they'll kill you. I mean, because it's what I had been hearing. So I mean, it was theoretical at the very beginning, and I don't think I began to put the pieces totally together until after he had died. But I knew that the protocol, I knew that the vent and whatever they gave him was going to kill him. I knew that, and
Yeah.
I didn't say that expressly to John, but like I said, are you sure you want to do this? Are you really sure? Because I said, I'm going to be making all your health decisions from now, from here on. And is this really what you want? And my son asked him too, because he was starting to freak out, but he said it's what he wanted. And I, he was of sound mind, and maybe he
Yeah.
just couldn't take it anymore. I'll never know.
Yeah. I mean, hindsight is 2020, and you 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 can never second guess it. But okay. So how long was it? Well, let's talk first about the impacts that this had on your life.
I didn't hear that complete question.
So let's talk about some of the impacts that this whole experience and losing John and the way it happened has had on your life.
Well, I mean, where do you start? The rug gets pulled out from your life. We had been together 35 years, and now I'm 59 years old and a brand new widow. What do I do? What do I do? Luckily, I had a few questions answered at the hospital, but we went into the funeral home on Christmas Eve, which is a, what an experience. And they give you a checklist of things to do because I just didn't know, and I didn't know I had any. Well, he didn't have life insurance, but he had a little something through Lockheed Martin, and I didn't even know about it till later. But all the money stopped. His pension stopped, Social Security stopped, and I was just working part time. I was just totally lost. I totally lost, and we got through that. I made myself, if it was just one phone call a day at the beginning, just trying to get through. Um, we had him cremated. In fact, I keep his box of ashes in here with me. He's not going below ground. And when my time comes, my boys know to mix our ashes and take us up to one of our mountains and throw us off. But it was impacted because I I didn't know how to do any of the outside work. That was all him. And then I had to have a team around me, find a lawn person. About 2 weeks after John died, my car died, and so I was without a car and no money coming in until probably April of the next year when I cashed in my stock from the company. I needed something, and luckily the pension got started living it all, and doing these little telling about getting your social security and your pension. And so I got that all set up. I ended up getting a car, but I mean, I feel like half of me was amputated. And
Yeah.
the amputation itself will heal and you'll get there, but you're never going to get that other half back. It's not going to grow back. So my mother was widowed at 60, so about the same age I was. And she died several years back, but she's my role model because there's no reason I can't. But it's been difficult, and I waited the requisite year, and then I thought, my youngest and living far out here, so I said, why don't you come and live with me? Well, I've got room. You can treat it like it's your house. I'm the master bedroom. I made into a little grandma. So I I have my life. Both my boys have their lives in the house. It's not the same, and it's not what we would have wanted, but it's what's working out for us. Now his family are all down in Florida, and we keep in touch. But no, it's just a big hole. I mean, I I don't laugh like I used to. I mean, I have fun. I have, don't get me wrong, you do survive, but it's just not the same. And
Yeah.
y your heart just doesn't feel the same. There's always a little a John-shaped hole in my heart. And
Yeah.
that, you know, I can plant little flowers in there, and now he's not going to see his new grandbaby who's going to be born in any minute, really. He missed out on that. He missed out on at least his granddaughters knew him and may remember him. They were old enough for that. But my youngest son Eric told me the other day he remembers grandma's voice really well, but he said dad's voice is starting to muffle a little bit in his memory, and that hurts you in a real special way. It's like forgetting your dad's voice. So yeah, it's the emptiness
Yeah.
that he left behind.
Yeah. I mean, so first of all, I just want to say that I'm incredibly sorry for everything that's happened to you, John, your family. It never should have happened. It There was no real reason why people should have died when there was such effective, cheap, uh, safe treatment that saved hundreds of thousands of people. But um, I I also, want to thank you for telling your story publicly because that takes a lot of first of all, it takes a lot of moral courage. Second of all, we hear all the time where somebody heard a story, watched a video, learned about somebody's story, and then they were able to save their loved one, or they felt validated, right? That what they were
Right.
going through wasn't, that they were not crazy. Basically, people are like, I wasn't crazy. And so, and it's since it's still happening, it's still happening. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, uh, we learned of a 13-year-old boy that we had been working with, um, was put on a ventilator and died from the latest version of COVID. So they're still doing the same remdesivir ventilator
I can't
type
believe they're
treatment.
still doing that. Oh,
I know, me neither, but they are, and it needs to stop, and they need to pull it. So, so while we fight for justice for people who went through this, and for the victims who passed away, we fight for justice for them. We also are actively in that fight to make sure more people don't die, and that's where we partner with Laura Bartlett for with her I do not consent form.com and her hospital hostage helpline, which is still needed. Still, it's a shame, but it's still needed, and she still has to do it. So these stories are important, and I thank you for being willing to tell your story. Can you, as we kind of close out here, uh, what's one of your most favorite memories of John?
mm. Well, because I have so many. We were together for so long. Just how happy he was doing the dog shows, and um, he loved his bird watching. I took some of his ashes up to one of the areas that he used to watch the eagle's nest out at Lake Junaluska, which is near our house. And when I would get done running, I would always see him looking with his binoculars up at that eagle's nest. So I brought some of his ashes right where he used to stand and sprinkled them there. So he's always going to be near those birds. And just that he was such a good guy, and all the people that he worked with and his friends, that's all they would tell me, how he was just such a nice man. And I treasure that. I
Yeah.
really do.
Well, we we appreciate you sharing about John and sharing his story with everyone. And I want to encourage people to go and like and share this video, and check out our hospital deadly playbook. And if you recognize those tactics in your own story, please um, feel free to put in an intake and set up an interview, and tell your story. We want to give everybody a platform to tell their stories, to get these out there in the general public and kind of wake people up. But at the very least, please put your loved one, have your loved one on the medical crime victim wall. And so we want to hear stories of COVID protocols, COVID shots, but also other medical betrayal, such as hospice, nursing home deaths, and that type of thing. So there's an intake for all of it. So thank you very much, Vicki,
Thank
and thanks everybody for watching.